Hi, Founder fans. Jason here. Welcome to Founder of the Day, Federalist Papers, Federalist number 11. I'm going to make myself not blurry. There we go. And we're back. Great start. So, we are doing what we always do with these read-alongs. We are discussing a Federalist paper. We are coming off yesterday with James Madison having written his famous number 10 about tyranny of the majority. And if you want to learn about that, go back to that video. Now, first we're going to go over here to the actual discussion. There we go. Federalist number 11. We are going to be, this one is Alexander Hamilton, November 25th, 1787 for the Independent Journal. We are covering the utility of the Union in respect to commercial relations and a navy. So, moving on to fears of too big a government to how we can make money and be powerful at sea. As always, to the people of the state of New York, and I should say, if this is your first time popping in, we do have a link in the description below that you can read along. And I'm going line by line through these documents to really pick apart this fun 18th century language. So, the importance of the Union in a commercial light is one of those points about which there is at least room to entertain a difference of opinion and which has, in fact, commanded the most general assessment of men who have any acquaintance with this subject. So, when it comes to commerce under the Union, we need to talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. This applies as well to our intercourse with foreign countries as well as with each other. So, commerce not just internationally, but between states. There are appearances to authorize a supposition, fun word. There are appearances to authorize a supposition that the adventurous spirit, which distinguishes the commercial character of America, has already excited uneasy sensations in several of the maritime powers of Europe. Supposition. So it's to suppose, I guess. What he's saying here is the European powers, the nations of Europe, are already kind of curious as to exactly what this new United States is going to be doing, if they are going to work together or not. It has been a little ambiguous to this point, because they do share debts to certain European nations, that's for sure. They seem to be apprehensive of our too great interference in that carrying trade, which is the support of their navigation and the foundation of their naval strength. So basically, because America declared independence, what's going on with the United States? Well, Europe sees that as troublesome for not just their own trade, but, their navies in general. Like, what are these now independent ships going to be doing, and who are they going to be friendly with? Those of them which have colonies in America look forward to what this country is capable of becoming with painful solitude. So they can't wait to see what happens, but they're a little nervous. And that's not solitude, it's solicitude. I'm sorry. They foresee the dangers that may threaten their American dominion from the neighborhood of states which have all the dispositions and would possess all the means requisite to the creation of a powerful marine. So, the other European countries, especially the ones that have colonies in North America, mostly at this point, that when he's writing, Britain and Spain, they're nervous. They're nervous about what these states are going to do, because they could, as Hamilton's saying here, be pretty powerful and get in the way of certain ambitions of the European nations. Oh, went too far. Impressions of this kind will naturally indicate the policy of fostering divisions among us, and of depriving us, as far as possible, of an active commerce in our own bottoms. So, because the European nations are nervous about what might happen with the separate states, they will do their best to divide the states, which will hurt interstate trade, and therefore the states themselves. This would answer the threefold purpose of preventing our interference in their navigation, of monopolizing the profits of our trade, and of clipping the wings by which we might soar to a dangerous greatness. So there are three problems that Europe could see with the United States. As he said earlier, and as he says here, interfering with their navigation, so getting on in their way on the seas, monopolizing the profits of our trade. So really, America getting super wealthy off the trade in North America, which all European nations still needed to trade with North America to a certain degree at this point. And most European nations, I should say. And the clipping of our wings by which we might soar to dangerous greatness. So they don't want America to be great. Not cool, Britain. Or Europe, sorry, Britain. Not just Britain. Did not prudence forbid the detail, it would not be difficult to trace by facts the workings of this policy to the cabinets of ministers. So if we wanted to, we could trace it to like the people running these other countries. If we continue united, we may counteract a policy so unfriendly to our prosperity in a variety of ways. So if we stay united, so he's not saying if we unite under the Constitution, he's saying if we remain united, which is a little bit of a step back from how he was behaving a little earlier in his essays. If we continue, if we may, if we stay united, we work together, we can stop them from dividing us in a variety of ways. One is by prohibitory regulations extending at the same time throughout the states, we may oblige foreign countries to bid against each other for the privileges of our markets. So if we work together, we can play Spain off France off Britain to get the most profit, as opposed to them. If we're disunited, then those nations could play the separate states against each other in exactly the same way. Let's see, unless I missed it, this is a pretty long sentence. We'll probably have to break it down. That's okay. This assertion will not appear chimerical to those who are able to appreciate the importance of the markets of 3 millions of people, increasing in rapid progression, for the most part exclusively addicted to agriculture and likely from local circumstances to remain so. To any manufacturing nation, and the immense difference there would be to the trade and navigation of such a nation, between a direct communication in its own ships and an indirect conveyance of its products and returns to and from America in the ships of another country. So let's go back and break that down. So again, he's talking about how we can play European nations off each other for the most profit. This assertion will not appear chimerical to those who are able to appreciate the importance of markets of 3 or 4 millions of people. So if you understand how important markets and trade are to the millions of Americans, you should be able to follow Hamilton's logic here. Increasing in rapid progression, for the most part, exclusively addicted to agriculture, and likely from local circumstance to remain so. Okay, so it's like an aside here. Exclusively addicted to agriculture, and so okay, yeah, we're gonna pass by that real quick because he's going to. I'm sorry, just reading through it again. Remember, I'm on camera. I gotta keep speaking out loud. So this is a very tricky sentence here. The way he's worded it. If you know about the importance of 3 or 4 million people and how trade markets work, and then, understanding most people are part of the agricultural system, to any manufacturing nation, and the immense difference there would be to such trade and navigation. So essentially what he's saying here is if you understand how 3 or 4 million people work in a manufacturing nation, and he's acknowledging briefly there, I understand most people here don't understand how trade works with 3 or 4 million people in a manufacturing nation. Most people from local circumstances are farmers, and he says addicted to agriculture, but we don't want to stay that way. Again, when he's writing this, Thomas Jefferson is still in Europe. And the immense difference there would be to trade and navigation of such a nation. So a manufacturing nation would have really a need for these massive trade markets. Between a direct communication in its own ships and an indirect conveyance of its products and returns to and from America in the ships of another country. So, as he's saying here, do we want to have all the trade with America done on British or French ships, or do we want America to have her own ships? Very confusing way to put that. I have a feeling that would have been confusing at the time. And here, Hamilton is going to do his favorite thing, ask a bunch of questions in a row. Suppose, for instance, we had a government in America capable of excluding Britain, with whom we have at present no treaty of commerce, from all our ports. What would be the probable operation of this step upon her politics? So let's say that we didn't let Great Britain ship to any American port. How would that make Britain think about their actions over here? Would it not enable us to negotiate with the fairest prospect of success for commercial privileges and the most valuable and extensive kind in the dominions of that kingdom? So, Britain, in this scenario, not being allowed to ship anything to America would be more accommodating to some of America's demands. Although when the Jay Treaty is written, that's not entirely true. When these questions have been asked upon other occasions, they have received a plausible but not solid or satisfactory answer. So these questions have been asked, but we don't know the answer quite yet. It has been said that prohibitions on our part would produce no change in the system of Britain, because she could prosecute her trade with us through the medium of the Dutch, who would be her immediate customers and paymasters for those articles which were wanted for the supply of our market. So if we said, Britain, you can't trade with America, they would trade with the Dutch, and the Dutch would come trade with America as a middleman. But would not her navigation be materially injured by the loss of the important advantage of being her own carrier in that trade? So wouldn't you make more money not putting a middleman in there? Would not the principal part of its profits be intercepted by the Dutch as a compensation for their agency and risk? Oh, I did two here, but would not the mere circumstance of freight occasion a considerable deduction? So again, same thing, like aren't the Dutch going to get more money out of it than, why pay the Dutch at all, basically? Would not so circuitous an intercourse facilitate the competitions of other nations by enhancing the price of British commodities in our markets, and by transferring to other hands the management of this interesting branch of the British commerce? So, wouldn't it make it, if we could play the British off the other countries, wouldn't the other countries offer us better prices than Britain and force Britain to essentially do what we're demanding when it comes to trade? Hamilton loves asking questions. All right, another lengthy sentence here. A mature consideration of the objects suggested by these questions will justify a belief that the real disadvantages to Britain from such a state of things, conspiring with the prepossessions of a great part of the nation in favor of the American trade, and with the importunities of West Indian islands, would produce a relaxation in her present system, and would let us into the enjoyment of privileges in the markets of those islands everywhere, from which our trade would derive the most substantial benefits. So not only would Britain be more apt to bow to some of America's demands, but it would put America in a position to have access to Britain's ports in the Caribbean, which were extremely important for world trade at the time, part of the famous triangle trade. And so not only could America be trading with her own ports, but then have access to the British ports down there as well. Oh, all over the place. Such a point gained from the British government, and which could not be expected without an equivalent in exemptions and immunities in our markets, would be likely to have a correspondent effect on the conduct of other nations, who would not be inclined to see themselves altogether supplanted in our trade. So once we get the British to bow to some of our demands, the rest of Europe will follow suit. Again, Britain at this point has arguably the most powerful navy in the world. So with Britain, oftentimes goes the world. That's not 100% true. Obviously, there were constant wars with France and Spain and the Dutch and everyone else. But, the greatest military power in the world has a say in economics. It's kind of always how it's been. A further resource for influencing the conduct of European nations towards us in this respect, would arise from the establishment of a federal navy. So, in addition to working together, so he's moving on now from his first argument, which was instead of letting the European nations divide us, we come together under the Constitution and we can influence the nations of Europe instead. Also, we're going to start a navy. There can be no doubt that the continuance of the Union under an efficient government would put it in our power, at a period not very distant, to create a navy which, if it could not vie with those of the great maritime powers, would at least be of respectable weight if thrown into the scale of either of two contending parties. So, Hamilton's saying, we could pretty quickly make a nice navy. Not the best navy in the world. We couldn't go around the world telling them what to do, but we could be powerful enough that if two major European nations go to war and we sided with one of them, we could be the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. If Britain and France go to war with their navies, if we have a pretty good navy, well, adding a pretty good navy to one of the two great navies could help us be deciders in which way wars are turning. This would be more peculiarly the case in relation to the operations in the West Indies. I'm surprised he used peculiarly and not particularly, but so he's saying, especially over in the West Indies. I'm assuming he's going to go on to say how, like, we're much closer to the West Indies, aka Caribbean, than Europe is. A few ships of the line, sent opportunely to the reinforcement of either side, would often be sufficient to decide the fate of a campaign, on the event of which interest the great magnitude were suspended. So, like I just said, if Britain and France are at war around the world, as they were wont to do at the time, we could go down to the Caribbean and help decide who won down there. Our position is, in this respect, a most commanding one. Very powerful. And it almost reminds me, it's kind of like he's predicting what would become the Monroe Doctrine, where we said, hey, Europe, stay out of this hemisphere. Stay away from either of the Americas, North or South, which goes on to be more important later on under Theodore Roosevelt when he has the corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. So, kind of a bold prediction there that comes true for Hamilton. And if to this consideration we add that of the usefulness of supplies from this country in the prosecution of military operations in the West Indies, it will readily be perceived that a situation so favorable would enable us to bargain with great advantage for commercial privileges. So, not only could we send just a few warships to help decide what happens in the Caribbean, but we can easily transport goods to support the supplies you need for military operations. We can send that from here a lot quicker than they can travel it over from Europe. And because of that, Europe will really want us on their side. Where's the end of it? There it is. A price would be set not only upon our friendship, but upon our neutrality. So not only would they help try and convince, not only would Europe try and convince America and our Navy to be on their side, but they might just try and convince us to stay out of it. It might be better. Just don't let the Americans jump in. By a steady adherence to the Union, we may hope, ere long, to become the arbiter of Europe in America, and to be able to incline the balance of European competitions in this part of the world as our interests may dictate. So, if we stick together in the Union under the Constitution, we could not only help decide what's happening in Europe, not only have Europe want us on their team, but we can decide what Europeans doing in North America. Again, predicting the Monroe Doctrine. But he's basically saying, like, New Spain, the Spanish own a large part of South, Central, and North America at this point. Britain has Canada. Portugal still has Brazil. And then all the Caribbean islands where so much trade was going on. We could be in charge of that. But in the reverse of this eligible situation, we shall discover that the rivalships of the parts would make them checks upon each other, and would frustrate all the tempting advantages which nature has kindly placed within our reach. So if we don't unite under the Constitution, instead of having this great situation where we're telling Europe what to do, we instead, as separate states, would take each other out at the knees, essentially, and our intermingling, our bickering between states would take all of these great things, the ability to dictate what's happening in Europe, out of our reach. Quick sip of water here, excuse me. In a state so insignificant, our commerce would be a prey to the wanton intermeddlings of all nations at war with each other, who, having nothing to fear from us, would with little scruple or remorse supply their wants by depredations on our property as often as it is fell in their way. So, being so negligible, that's an 18th century word. Being so powerless in this situation, should we not unite under the Constitution, then if Europe just feels like it, any European nation could just brush off what we're trying to do and hurt our commerce. Oops. The rights of neutrality will only be respected when they are defended by an adequate power. A nation, despicable by its weakness, forfeits even the privilege of being neutral. So, as he said earlier, Europe, if we have a fairly powerful navy and we're united, then Europe will essentially pay us off to stay out of it. But we won't, if we don't have that powerful navy, we can't stay out of it. Europe will demand we join, even if we're powerless to help. Under a vigorous national government, and I think that's the first time Hamilton uses the word national, under a vigorous national government, the natural strength and resources of the country, directed in a common interest, would baffle all the combinations of European jealousy to restrain our growth. So if we jump in under a national government, build this navy, get this great commerce going, even if Europe all united against us, we'd still be able to fight off the commercial implications that they would be trying to impose on us. This situation would even take away the motive to such combinations by inducing an impracticability of success. So not only would Europe not be able to unite against us, they wouldn't want to, because they want to be the ones trading with us over their neighbors. An active commerce, an extensive navigation, and a flourishing marine would then be the offspring of moral and physical necessity. So having, the navy and the trade and use of the waters of the world are both a moral and physical necessity. So not going to translate that. You get it. We might defy the little arts of the little politicians to control or vary the irresistible and unchangeable course of nature. So those little politicians who are trying to assume power and mess with us, we might be able to stop them. Although, some would say that Hamilton was one of those little arts of a little politician. So Tommy Jeff would say that, I'm sure. But in a state of disunion, these combinations might exist and might operate with success. So if we don't get together, these things might happen. Real long sentence? Okay. It would be in the power of the maritime nations, availing themselves of our universal impotence, to prescribe the conditions of our political existence. And as they have a common interest in being our carriers, and still more in preventing our becoming theirs, they would in all probability combine to embarrass our navigation in such a manner as would in effect destroy it and confine us to passive commerce. And he capitalized that, not me. What he's saying here, Hamilton's basically saying, if we don't unite under the Constitution and have this powerful navy, then Europe will unite together. They'll all just say, hey guys, if you see an American ship, shoot at it. I will too. It's basically, So at this point, Hamilton's basically said, if we need to unite under the Constitution to build this navy, because then we'll be telling Europe what to do, and we'll have complete control over in North America, and there's no chance. And if we don't do it, they're definitely going to unite against us. All of Europe, for the first time in history, is going to come together and unite against us. We should then be compelled to content ourselves with the first price of our commodities, and to see the profits of our trade snatched from us to enrich our enemies and persecutors. So Europe will just take our trade routes, they'll take our boats, they'll take all of our stuff. We won't be able to trade with anyone. That unequaled spirit of enterprise, which signals the genius of the American merchants and navigators, and which in itself an inexhaustible mine of national wealth, would be stifled and lost. A poverty and disgrace would overspread a country which, with wisdom, might make herself the admiration and envy of the world. So, Americans, we're enterprising, our merchants, our navigators, pulling up by the bootstraps, doing a great job, could lead to fabulous riches for the United States, but if we don't unite, it'll all be lost. We will be poor and embarrassed, and instead of doing what we could do, which is become the admiration and envy of the world. There are rights of great moment to the trade of America, which are rights of the Union. I allude to the fisheries, to the navigation on the western lakes, and to that of the Mississippi. So America is really fortunate in its situation because of the waterways it has access to. He points to the fisheries, which are primarily off the coast of like Maine up through eastern Canada, that part of the coast. Real important fisheries there that fed a huge portion of the world the fish they needed. He also points to the navigation of the Western Lakes, so the Great Lakes is what he means here, and to that of the Mississippi. All important trade routes. Now, at this time in the 1780s, John Jay will tell you, Spain was not really letting Americans trade down the Mississippi. Spain had control of it. They would, from time to time, they did often let people trade, but had really high taxes on Americans who were trading out there. It was a real problem. Ends up becoming a real problem, especially later on during the Whiskey Rebellion, because Spain wouldn't let people trade, and the farmers. I'm not going to get into it. We can talk about the Whiskey Rebellion another time. But he's saying, look at all these waterways we have. We could be ready. And I will also, one more note is, a few decades later, New York builds the Erie Canal, which connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes, to the Mississippi, down to the Gulf of Mexico. So he's kind of predicting that. The dissolution of the Confederacy would give room for delicate questions concerning the future existence of these rights, which the interests of more powerful partners would hardly fail to solve to our disadvantage. So if we dissolve if we dissolve the Confederacy, we're all separate states, then we might not have access to these really important trading waterways. And the fisheries are important. The fisheries get discussed in the Jay Treaty as well. Okay. The disposition of Spain with regard to the Mississippi needs no comment. Okay, well, I already did comment about Spain with the Mississippi, but that's kind of the point I was going for here, is it's so well known to everyone in America at this point that trading down the Mississippi is necessary. People are quickly moving to Kentucky and Tennessee and the Ohio region. We need access to the Mississippi, but everyone knows. Hamilton loves to talk, and he doesn't even talk about it because everyone knows it's such a problem. Often overlooked today when we're talking about American revolutionary history. France and Britain are concerned with us in the fisheries and view them as of the utmost moment to their navigation. So again, as I said, the fisheries were largely off the coast of Canada, which for a long time had been owned by France and now was owned by Great Britain, and touchy subject. They, of course, would hardly remain long indifferent to that decided mastery of which experience has shown us to be possessed in this valuable branch of traffic, and by which we are able to undersell those nations in their own markets. So basically, like, Great Britain and France understand that the Americans can just fill a ship with fish and sail over to Great Britain or France and sell at a lower cost than they can, because Britain and France had to sail across to North America, which costs money, get the fish and sail back. So that extra part of the trip and various other smaller reasons lead to America being able to sell cheaper in Europe certain products than the Europeans could. What more natural than what more natural than that? I can do it. What more natural than that they should be disposed to exclude from the list such dangerous competitors? So, of course, they're going to want to, if we don't have this powerful Navy to protect our interests, of course, they're going to not let us, they're just going to say, no, Americans can't sell here. And that's that. This branch of trade ought not to be considered as a partial benefit. All the navigating states may, in different degrees, advantageously participate in it, and under circumstances of a greater extension of mercantile capital, would not be unlikely to do it. So that's a double negative at the end there. So he's talking about this branch of our trade. So the fisheries, it shouldn't just be looked at as part of what would be good. All the states, so right now only certain states really were active in the fishing trade, but uniting under the Constitution would give more of the states access to this particular trade. And extending it meant more trade. It would make all of the states wealthier, is what he's going for here. As a nursery of seamen, it now is, or when time shall have more nearly assimilated the principles of navigation in the several states, will become a universal resource. So a nursery of seamen. So America, we are making ship sailors. We are creating sailors. We're a nursery of seamen, and we will have more access to the fisheries, which will make all of the states wealthier, because all of the states, and he's saying it will become a universal resource. These access to the fisheries that we have is so much better than that of Europe, that it can help both the economy of the United States and the people of the United States. To the establishment of a navy, it must be indispensable. So we need the navy. Quick sip of water here. A lot of talking. Okay. To this great national object, a navy, union will contribute in various ways. Every institution will grow and flourish in proportion to the quantity and extent of the means concentrated towards its formation and support. So there are a lot of ways a navy will help the United States. Every part of the country will grow and flourish in proportion to the means concentrated towards support. This is, in a weird way, reminds me of the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower would later talk about, where if we build a powerful navy, it's going to help all the industries in the country, because the shipbuilders are going to do better, the merchants are going to do better, the bankers are going to do better, the carpenters who do the work on are going to do better, the sailors are going to do better, people who grow food will need to be supply, people who produce food will do better because they're helping these navies. People make alcohol, which is good for storing on ships. So just a wide variety of the nation and the economy at large will do better the bigger, more powerful we build our navy. A navy of the United States, as it would embrace the resources of all, is an object far less remote than a navy of any single state or partial confederacy, which would only embrace the resources of a single part. So if we unite under the Constitution, we'll be able to build a better navy because we have so many resources coming from all these states, instead of like just Georgia building its own navy. It only has access to the resources within Georgia, or that which it can trade for. And as Hamilton alluded to earlier, he was under the impression that Europe would just blow off Georgia's trade or New York's trade or any other state's trade, because the states would be bickering amongst themselves anyway. It happens, indeed, that different positions of Confederated America possess each some peculiar advantage for this essential establishment. So, different states have different things they can help with. The more southern states furnish in greater abundance certain kinds of naval stores, tar, pitch, and turpentine. So the southern states make some better stuff for, it says naval stores, but essentially building ships. Their wood for the construction of ships is also of a more solid and lasting texture. So the South can really help building the ships themselves. The difference in the duration of the ships of which the Navy might be composed, if chiefly constructed of southern wood, would be of signal importance either in the view of naval strength or of national economy. So the duration of ships. So if we build ships with southern wood, then they will last longer. Some of the southern and of the middle states yield a greater plenty of iron and better quality. So you got some states are giving us, South's giving us wood, middle states are giving us iron. Seamen must chiefly be drawn from the northern hive. So most of our best sailors are from New England. What a great combination. The necessity of naval protection to external or maritime commerce does not require a particular elucidation, no more than the conductiveness of that species of commerce to the prosperity of a navy. So, a navy both protects commerce, and commerce is grown under a navy. A long way saying that. Navy helps economy. The Navy helps the economy. Economy helps the Navy. An unrestrained intercourse between the states themselves will advance the trade of each by an interchange of their respective productions, not only for the supply of reciprocal wants at home, but for the exportation of foreign markets. So, an unrestricted intercourse between the states themselves. So he's moving on to talking about how it would help between the states. If we keep trading with each other without any problems in the middle, we're under one constitution, so the borders don't matter. It will just be great for absolutely everyone. The veins of commerce in every part will be replenished and will acquire additional motion and vigor from a free circulation of the commodities of every part. So again, we're just going to be helping the economy the more we work together on this great and powerful navy. Commercial enterprise will have a much greater scope from the diversity in the productions of different states. Okay, so again, the commerce is going to do better because the states are doing more for the navy, blah, blah, blah. When the staple of one fails from a bad harvest or unproductive crop, it can call to its aid the staple of another. So that's important. If you have a Virginia Navy and Virginia has all the trees fall down and they can't build, they don't have any wood, well, they're out of luck. But if we're under the Constitution, then they can ask South Carolina or North Carolina, which is actually closer to Virginia, to send some wood of theirs. Is probably a poor example, but what he's going for you. It can be conducted upon much better terms with a large number of materials of a given value than with a small number of materials of the same value, arising from the competitions of trade and from the fluctuations of markets. So it can be conducted upon much better terms with a large number of materials than with a small number of materials of the same value. So again, still, if we have the states competing, then that's going to drive up the costs of this navy, unless they're working together under the Constitution. Particular articles may be in great demand at certain periods and unsaleable at others. But if there are particular articles may be in great demand at certain periods and unsaleable at others. But if there be a variety of articles, it can scarcely happen that they should all be at one time in the latter predicament. And on this account, the operations of the merchant would be less liable to any considerable obstruction or stagnation. So, as I was saying before, if everyone wants to buy wood at the same time in Virginia, Virginia's selling all its wood to the citizens, there's less wood to build ships with. But in this great nation, by great I mean large and full of people, there's less of a chance that all the wood in the whole United States will be bought by all the people than there is that the wood of one state will be bought by the people of that state. The speculative trader will at once perceive the force of these observations, and will acknowledge that the aggregate balance of the commerce of the United States would bid fair to be much more favorable than that of the 13 states without union or with partial unions. So, any trader, anyone in the business of making money, will acknowledge that the total value of all the states combined was more than the separate states. Okay. It may perhaps be replied to this that whether the states are united or disunited, there would still be an intimate intercourse between them which would answer the same ends. This intercourse would be fettered, interrupted, and narrowed by a multiplicity of causes which in the course of these papers have been amply detailed. So, yes, you could argue that we are the United States, and even if we're under separate state governments and we're not united under the Constitution, we still are on friendly terms and we're still going to be trading with each other. We do have the Articles of Confederation. We are confederated. We are a team. And Hamilton saying, yes, you can say that, but as we've discussed in previous papers, as he so distinctly put it, how terrible it would go should the states be not united under the Constitution. We've talked about that before. That's basically what he's saying. We've spoken about this before. Get over it. A unity of commercial as well as political interests can only result from a unity of government. So we can only really unify both economically and politically if we unify in fact under the Constitution. There are other points of view in which this subject might be placed of a striking and animating kind. So we can talk about this in much more bombastic ways, basically what he's saying there. But they would lead us too far into the regions of futurity and would involve topics not proper for a newspaper discussion. So we could have these big conversations about, but regions of futurity. I'm not sure what futurity means. If it actually means take us too far into the future. And would not involve topics proper for a newspaper discussion. So, sure, Anti-Federalists are asking questions in the papers, but I'm not going to respond to them. Well, maybe a little bit. Can't help himself. I shall briefly observe that our situation invites and our interests prompt us to aim at an ascent in the system of American affairs. So, our system invites us and our interests prompt us to aim at an ascent in the system of American affairs. So we want to make America better. So I am going to say we want to work together to be better. The world may politically, as well as geographically, be divided into 4 parts, each having distinct sets of interests. So there are 4 parts of the world. Okay, well, now there's 7. I mean, they knew about Australia. Unhappily for the other 3, Europe, by her arms and by her negotiations, by force and by fraud, has, in different degrees, extended her dominion over all of them. So, there are 4 parts of the world. Europe is the most powerful, obviously. Africa, Asia, and America have successively felt her dominion. Interesting. Africa and Asia he's counting as 2 parts of the world. Europe is another part, and America. So North and South America he's counting as 1 part. Also, sorry, Australia. And I don't know if they've actually made it to Antarctica yet. I don't know if they've actually been there at this point. Okay, let's talk about Europe. How powerful. The superiority she has long maintained has tempted her to plume herself as the mistress of the world, and to consider the rest of mankind as created for her benefit. So Europe thinks it's the best, goes around the world, taking what it wants. Everyone else works for Europe. Men admired as profound philosophers have, in direct terms, attributed to her inhabitants a physical superiority, and have gravely asserted that all animals, and with them the human species, degenerate in America, that even dogs cease to bark after having breathed a while in our atmosphere. So, even European philosophers are saying that Europeans are physically superior, they are the best. Anyone who's not from Europe is an animal, and dogs cease to bark after breathing our air. So even when a dog goes to America, they can't bark anymore. They just become limp and useless. Impotent, as Hamilton said earlier. I don't think that's true. Our dogs bark here, but whatever. Facts have too long supported these arrogant pretensions of Europe. So, everyone knows Europe's arrogant. It belongs to us to vindicate the honor of the human race and to teach that assuming brother moderation. So it is up to the United States to tell the world, to prove vindicate the honor of the human race by signing the Constitution and preaching moderation. Union will enable us to do it. Anyway, not much to say there. Disunion will add another victim to his triumphs. So, yes. Let Americans disdain to be the instruments of European greatness. We should not be Europeans. Europe isn't that great, and we can't let it be great. We can't. I don't know how else to say it. Let the 13 states bound together in a strict and indissoluble union, concurring in erecting one great American system, superior to the control of all transatlantic force or influence, and able to dictate the terms of the connection between the old and the new world. Yeah. So that whole last paragraph is like a real rah-rah. Like, you get it. You see what I'm saying? We need a powerful navy. It'll make our economy great. It'll make our trading great. Europe will do whatever we say. They won't mess with us. Let's not prop up Europe. Let Europe prop up us. Publius. Which is a how high joke I was just making. And that is that. That, my friends, is Federalist number 11. Alexander Hamilton, essentially, to recap, arguing that to make the best thing America can do is unite under the Constitution, get a fantastic navy going that can protect our fantastic trade routes. We will send our ships all around the world. Europe, because if we don't unite, Europe will play the states against each other. But if we do unite, Europe will really need our trade. And we can play them against each other for who wants our trade more. After all, we could sell certain products in Europe cheaper than the Europeans themselves can do it. And if we have just a pretty good navy, we'll be able to go down to the Caribbean and influence any wars that might be going on there. Whoever side we choose will be the best. In fact, both sides will probably pay us to stay out of it. I mean, the truth is, we do learn pretty quickly under the Jefferson administration that when Britain and France are going to war, they don't care about America, even with their navy. And both of them say, can't trade with the other one or we're going to attack you. And it ends up pretty much sending us to war. Oh, but actually, first it's the Embargo Act, which is interesting in itself for a variety of reasons. But that's that. Hamilton says a navy. Oh, and also building the navy will make us stronger because we'll build a better navy because we have the resources of all the states. And all the states can contribute certain parts, and that's that. It'll also help the economy, like we said, like a military-industrial complex, as it later became known. So, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit like. If you're new here, subscribe. If you want to, I'm wearing one of my shirts right now. Oh, it's on this side. How does it go? There it is. One of my Betsy Ross flag shirts. This is the hoodie. It says ... and the pursuit of happiness on the back. So if you want to support the channel, check out the merch through the link below. Other than that, I am Jason. I am out of here. Thank you for watching. I am your humble and obedient servant, and I will be back with another founder for you tomorrow.